we got to talk about the NFL Combine. Because as you know, there's nothing more exciting to me in the NFL draft, process than the NFL Combine. I really love the meat market. 300 plus athletes that are at the peak of their physical prowess under one Lucas Oil roof, running in their skivvies. I haven't been that excited about something since like the opening last June. So I get it twice a year, right? The opening is basically the high school version of the NFL Combine. But after this weekend, where some of the guys we thought were going to performed well, and some of the guys that we didn't really know about got to show that they are absolute physical freaks. And yet we're still talking about Bryce Young and how much that dude weighs. All right. So I want to start there. The man is 5'10" and an eighth, and he weighed in at 204 pounds. Right now, I think it's interesting that many people were relating one Bryce Young and his ability to Kyler Murray, but I think when you look at it on screen, that is what you're talking about. You're talking about a dude that can get himself out of trouble, who can Houdini out of a sack and turn that into a first down or even a touchdown. And it's not like he was just doing this against bad football teams. He was doing this against everybody. In the national championship game in 2021, I thought, or 2022 going for the 2021 season, I thought that this dude was going to be dead to rights like at least 4 times in the process of that game. And he managed to escape from some of the best defenders in the sport, future NFL stars themselves. And he demonstrated that he can absolutely be a guy that runs your offense and the offense runs through at Alabama. The way that I tend to think about this is, quiet as it was kept, that was the worst receiver core that we've seen at Alabama basically since 2014. And you got to go back to when Amari Cooper was catching 100 passes, the only guy catching passes. And the reason I can say that is because Jahmyr Gibbs not only led that team in rushing as a tailback, but in receiving yards as a tailback, which is another way of saying Bryce Young was making it happen with Jahmyr Gibbs and whomever else he could find that was open. Sometimes that was Cameron Latou, sometimes that was Jermaine Burton, but it wasn't the kind of production that we're used to seeing from an Alabama wide receiving core. That said, I don't think the dude's going to play football at 204 pounds when he gets to the NFL. I have a real problem with guys beefing up for the purposes of weighing in on a scale, because that's not going to translate to a great football player. You're really trying to ask that guy to play the same kind of football he played at Alabama. And to do that, height and weight matter only so much for me, because are you special or are you not special? This is the part of the conversation that gets into excellence. And we'll continue to talk about excellence and my ongoing fascination with it as we do this. But another way of looking at this is, say he didn't throw at the Combine, right? Because he didn't need to. Now, he said he's going to throw at Alabama's Pro Day, but that's another way of saying you're going to do what Nick Saban asked you to do. And if Nick Saban asked you to throw at Pro Day, you're going to do that, because sticking with the program, sticking with the process is what you do as an Alabama football player. As a matter of fact, Devontae Smith said it best. How did he come out so ready to play at Philadelphia and help them reach a Super Bowl in just like his second year in the league? I went to Alabama. That's the answer to a lot of these questions. Now, on top of not throwing, we got to see another guy not perform, and I don't think it hurt his draft stock at all. I should back up. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, RJ, slow down. Jaxon Smith-Njigba did perform at the Combine. He just didn't run the 40-yard dash at the Combine. And I made it very clear that I really enjoy watching dudes run the 40-yard dash, because inevitably I'm going to see some super freak speed, or I'm going to see a big man that is not supposed to be moving that fast. More on that in a minute. But Jaxon Smith-Njigba was already, for me, the best wide receiver in this draft, and is close to a can't-miss prospect at wide receiver in this draft that we've seen. I mean, I want to say it at least since Devontae Smith, right? So probably the last couple of years, he's right up there. But a lot of this is on the production that he had in 21. And the reason that people are not as high on him as they were going into the 22 season is because he didn't really play, right? He pulled that hamstring early, and it was touch and go. And then he was basically shut down for the rest of Ohio State's year. You have to wonder sometimes what would have happened if he would have been able to play in that game against Georgia, if Marvin Harrison Jr. and CJ Stroud would have had his help. Does it come down to a missed field goal? We'll never know. But he did show quickness and speed in the quickness and speed drills. His 3-cone drill is the fastest that we had seen from a receiver in a decade. Got to go back to 2013 for a guy that was running as fast as Jaxon Smith-Njigba was with a really solid 3-cone drill. And then we're talking about his 20-yard shuttle time being one of the fastest that we had seen over the last couple of years. Matter of fact, we're talking about a guy that has demonstrated change of direction as a wide receiver and did a lot of great work in the slot. Now, to that point, there had been some folks that said he's going to be good as a slot receiver and, could be the best slot receiver in the NFL in a couple of years' time, to which Smith-Njigba has said, no, I appreciate that y'all think that I'm good in the slot, but I'm good wherever I line up, whether that's outside or inside. And I think he needs to continue to say that out loud, because most of the work that he did in destruction of defenses was from the slot, which means that he benefited from the mismatch. He had the safety. He had the linebacker. He had the third best cornerback. You can do a lot of damage when you are consistently lining up against not just the dude that you're better than, but not the best pass defender on the field. And, to that end, KJ Hill was doing a lot of work for Ohio State. That spot didn't necessarily translate to the NFL. Paris Campbell, the same way. Terry McLaurin's the first dude that I can remember who went to Ohio State and made that slot receiver transition into a dominant receiver, big play threat at the NFL level. I think he still needs to push that. But I also think that it's very important not to overlook what his peers have had to say about him. And this is why I believe that he is the best wide receiver in this draft class. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson will tell anybody that would listen in 21, this is the best wide receiver in our room. And that is as both of those guys, first round draft picks, both of those guys had 1,000-yard receiving seasons as rookies. And one of those guys, Garrett Wilson, is Offensive Rookie of the Year on the Jets. Now, I don't want to turn this into, what the hell are the Jets, but you get my point there, all right? It's not easy. And yet and still, they would tell you Jaxon Smith-Njigba is going to be the best guy that Brian Hartline has ever produced. And then we're probably going to see the next guy that Brian Hartline has ever produced in Marvin Harrison Jr., because he's probably going to end up being a better draft prospect than Jaxon Smith-Njigba, which is a wild sentence to utter, but it is true. I think that his ability to be productive and be a 100-catch receiver is through the roof, right? It's just about where he goes and how they choose to deploy him. Now, the guy that was basically blowing up the combine is not a receiver, not a pass rusher, certainly not the offensive lineman that should be getting their due. It is a quarterback in Anthony Richardson. Now, we talked a bunch about Anthony Richardson going into the NFL Combine, about what he could show, because the tools were there. You could see what kind of an athlete this man was. Matter of fact, in high school, he used to go around calling himself Cam Jackson, which is a mashup of Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton, and you could see it as to why. At 6'4", 240 plus pounds, he ran a 4.43 40-yard dash. Now, that is absolutely moving. It's flying. But to do that at his size is otherworldly. And for a quarterback to show that sort of speed, to get that laser time at the combine is not easy. It's a reason as to why, like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, they don't need to run a 40, because we all know they're fast. We would still like to know how fast, right? Anthony Richardson answered that question. He also, I think, improved his draft prospects, because I think somebody's going to see all these tools he has, and they're going to want to try to bring him in and see what they can do with it. So we're still talking about a guy that could go in the first round, probably in the first 20 picks, if not the top 10 picks, depending on how the draft shows out and whether or not somebody else trades up to the top to go get a quarterback, say Indianapolis, to go get a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young. But I'm also looking at this going, did he make a larger leap than anybody slid? And I think so. Like, I was not overwhelmed by this NFL Combine. It just allowed me more confirmation bias, which is to say that if you already believe somebody was good, they showed you, once again, you're right to believe they're good. I'm not sure that Will Levis's draft prospects were worse because he participated in the combine. I just think that Anthony Richardson showed that he's a better athlete, not necessarily a better quarterback. It feels like it's a flavor test here. Do you like Pepsi or do you like Coke, right? You can go with one or the other. I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson because I just like more of what I see. But if you don't like what you see, you also are into a conversation about whether or not these statistics that he's able to throw up, these times, these measurements are worth a damn. And the reason I bring that up is because it's true. We need to talk about this, all right? Anthony Richardson completed just 53.8% of his passes in 2022. He threw for 2,549 yards, 17 pass TDs against 9 picks. That is not what you would expect from a first-round quarterback as a stat line. But then I took a look at this and said, what did he do against the ranked opponents, right? As many as Florida faced. So I'm going to go through this basically from the last game he played to the first one he played in 2022. So he's 9 of 27 for 198 against Florida State. He's 18 of 37 for 271 against Georgia, which I think might have been one of his best games. Well, one of his 2 best games as far as I'm concerned, because I think playing ranked opponents in the SEC matters that much more. He was 24 of 44 for 453 against Tennessee, but Tennessee had one of the worst secondaries, worst pass defenses in the SEC. So I'm not sure that I can really give him as much credit for that. And then we're talking about 14 of 35 for 143 against Kentucky, who had a pretty doggone good defense, 17 of 24 for 168 against Utah, who won the Pac-12 championship, right? And Florida won that game. But Florida also lost to Oregon State in a bowl game. Now, Anthony Richardson didn't play in that game, but you get my point here. So the argument might come down to, do you think that Anthony Richardson is a winner? Well, depends on how you want to view it. Because with him as their starting quarterback, they were 6-5. Without him, they were 6-6. And Oregon State became a better football team the longer they kept playing football. And they were just as close to beating up a USC team and really unseating what we thought was going to be a coronation for SC before Utah did. So I think when you're also looking at that, it doesn't bode well for Anthony Richardson that Texas A&M, 5-7 last year, beat Florida 41-24. And it certainly does not bode well for Anthony Richardson that he's quarterback at a time when Vanderbilt became a hissable villain, beating Florida 31-24. I'm not that old, and Vanderbilt ain't been that good for a very long time. And you might even add, they still ain't that good. Now, Clark Lee's certainly got that thing trending in the right direction. I believe they got their first SEC win in years this year. But you don't want to be a quarterback that was on the losing end of that as you're trying to convince other teams to draft you as a project. That's the problem here. Anybody that drafts Anthony Richardson right now is going to have to be very honest with themselves as a franchise and with him as a player. He needs to sit on a bench for a year. You have to teach him how to play quarterback at this level so it can slow down and he can be accurate with the football. Because if his accuracy improves from, say, 53.8% completion in college to something like 65 or 66 in the NFL, we're talking about a guy that can put you into divisional rounds, can give you an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. You just got to take your time with him, and you have to know that you are drafting his ability. You are not drafting his floor. His ceiling is through the roof. His floor can get you fired. Who is in a position to make that sort of pick in the first round? Those are the sort of franchises that are really giving Anthony Richardson their eye. Those were my takeaways from the NFL Combine. I really enjoyed it. I enjoy talking about it. We'll continue to talk about how guys perform at their various pro days as we lead up to the April NFL draft. But it also underscores just how important the NFL is to our sport, college football, right? Even as a college football analyst doing a college football show, I can't escape talking about the NFL. It's gonna happen. It will happen repeatedly. And it's not because I love talking about the NFL, doing a college football show. It's because I love talking about college football in conversation with the NFL. Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.